Yes, thank you so much. Steve, Christina, I think we've probably been to as many gallery teachers sessions as practically anyone. I don't remember such an active chat as the one that we were so lucky to be part of today. Steve, what was it about the topic of mentoring that so engaged you in the first place and has led to such an amazing uptake in chat today? Why is mentoring so rich as a discussion point?
I think first of all, I have to say that the idea to do this was Gabby's, not mine. And but when she suggested it, I thought, wow, that's actually a really good idea. Because as I said in the recording, I wasn't mentored officially. I had, as I said in IH Hastings, and Marie will remember this so well. We had, people around us with a vast experience, and it was there was a constant sharing, and that process, that theme, carried right the way through my career and is still with me. And in fact, it's that I think which drives me to want to make sure that new teachers are supported. And I'm actually quite passionate about it. I think there's nothing worse than I have met lots and lots of teachers around the world who had dropped into the classroom without any support, without any consideration of who they are, where they are, what they're doing, how they got there, where they're going, who their students, and it's just dreadful. And so that was my kind of, if you like, my driving motivation to try to get people more involved with. I hesitate to use the word help because I don't like it very much with all its connotations, but to assist, to support new teachers, and to foster this sense of toing and froing, whether you've been in the business for 20 years or 3 weeks, it doesn't really matter to me.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that impact of the first workplace and how it can set the tone. Christina, for you, what were your experiences in your first workplace and how did they perhaps shape you as becoming the mentor that you are now?
It was very similar to Steve's. It was, I mean, a bit more catastrophic. It was pre-CELTA, a dreadful speaking lesson that I gave and was observed on, and having the feedback of you better shape up or you're out in a week. And I went into the teacher's room going, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. And I had a great colleague that was like, okay, sit down, let me tell you some of the stages you're supposed to go through, because he was post CELTA. And he was like, okay, let's just, tell you what it is. And then I did it. Then I came back to him saying, that was amazing. How did you know that? And then he started telling me about what he does, sharing some ideas. But this is something that Gabby mentioned, like, how does one become a mentor? And I think this goes back to the idea of it has to have this there has to be this culture of sharing. Teachers tend, I mean, not all, but some teachers tend to hoard ideas, thinking it gives them an edge over others. Like maybe they'll be, passed for promotion if somebody else uses it, but it's not. Knowledge is there to be shared. There's no, what is the word that young people use? Gatekeeping of no knowledge. I'm trying to keep up to date with that vocab. It has to be that culture of sharing, and it helped me. Otherwise, I would have been out of teaching before you even started. But something else that's very important is that when teachers come in, especially post first certificate, post certificate, like a teaching certificate, they are sometimes, and I don't know, guys, if you felt that, but they're sometimes under the impression that that's it. They don't need any help anymore. They've got the paper from that organization, and that's it. And you have to, it's just the beginning. There is no ending. Is that something that you felt you ever had to experience, Neil? And what about your experience with mentoring?
What is interesting is that, I mean, I'm in a lucky position where I Well, I feel lucky. Whether the people that I work with feel lucky is another question entirely, because I do quite a lot of consultancy work now. And one of the things I've been involved in recently is looking at a accreditation scheme that looks at the private sector for a whole large group of language schools. And one of the things that came up recently was the real importance of year one in a teacher's career. And that if teachers don't engage with CPD, and I mean, mentoring and CPD, they're not the same thing, but nevertheless, I think they're part of a wider culture. That if that first year isn't, the teacher isn't able or isn't willing to engage with that professional development, that sets the tone for their entire career. So, it's interesting, isn't it, that Steve, Christina, and also Mari, who is with us today, who works as a CELTA trainer and also was at IH Hastings. You know, I think we've all shared those very positive early experiences. But I think what we're finding is that kind of somehow positive in energy, positive contributions engender a positive attitude. But we've had quite a lot of comments coming in about both the reluctant mentee and also potentially the reluctant mentor. So, at the risk of answering the question by asking another one, forgive me, Steve, do you have any thoughts? Perhaps if we start with the reluctant mentee, Christina's point, someone who thinks they know it all when palpably they can't, when they don't have much experience. How can we help that reluctant mentee to change mindset?
Yeah, I think it's really very interesting. I think I was almost that person, not quite. As I said right at the beginning of this, when I finished the IH teacher training course, I did think that I knew it all. You know, I mean, I was in my 30s, I was in my third career, and I wasn't going to start saying, you know, help me, help me. And so I understand where that person is coming from completely. I've also had, you know, I've trained army personnel to become teachers, and when they have got their certificates, many of them or some of them have also reacted in that same way. So I think that our job then as seniors, if you want, is to convince them. It's to gently coax them into a position. And the way to do that is by agreeing with almost everything they say and just now and again putting in a question. So I don't need I'm sure you don't. I don't need a mentor. I'm sure you don't. I may be a new teacher, but I know what I'm doing. Oh, I'm sure you do. Absolutely. This is the sort of response that I would give. And this will require patience and some dedication, I think. But if you really believe in what you're doing, which I do, even when I make mistakes, I still believe I'm right. If you believe in what you're doing, you'll follow that route. You'll triple. You know, I used to wait outside a classroom for a particular. This has just come to my mind. No, I would have probably included it. I used to wait outside a classroom for a particular teacher who didn't like me very much. I don't know how that works, but anyway. And exactly. And as they came out, I would say to them, "That sounded great. I could hear them laughing in there. What did you do to make them laugh like that?" And he would say something or other. And little by little, one step at a time, we had a coffee, we had a beer up the road, and little by little he came round. So this is my answer to the question. If you have a reluctant mentee, that's the person being mentored, then it's like tickling trout. Gently, gently, carefully, pull them round.
I'm hearing the importance in that answer, but in also a lot of what's coming up in chat about emotional intelligence, which might suggest and maybe supports your thesis. I don't know, Steve, that the best mentors are not the most experienced teachers, but the ones who are able to be flexible in what and how they share what they want and need to share with the mentee. Christina, what are your views about that relationship, the kind of the experience versus EQ line, if there is such a
It goes back to what Steve was talking about, over cramming and showing off with your knowledge, because obviously, they will be in awe of you and they will start listening, which obviously doesn't happen. It's all about building a personal connection. I completely agree with Steve. It just does not work if if they don't feel listened to. Okay, we know they need some help. They don't. Who cares if they're right? Who cares if they're wrong? You just get a personal connection, and then slowly we'll get there. I think it's completely utterly the right way to do it. I mean, I am in the Middle East, and without wanting to generalize, I've had, as a director of studies, I've had people coming in with PhDs and being insulted by the idea of having to do a demo lesson because I wanted to see that I have a PhD. You don't even have a PhD. I'm like, yeah, but I just want to see how you do it because I could learn something from it. So why don't you show me how you do it, and we'll see if we can integrate it into our classrooms. And it is really a question of, we have to be careful with titles, and as a mentor or as a mentee, it's not about shining and we are the best and look at all these titles I have again after me. No, it's about building a relationship and then slowly tickling crabs or tickling tigers, whichever you want to go with, Mary. It's about building that connection that will lead to some kind of learning, emotional intelligence or empathy. It's just realizing that they've just spent a lot of money and a lot of time and so much, they went through so much stress to get that paper, that they are in they kind of right to say, well, I'm sorry, after all this I deserve some respect. So okay, you're right. Show me what do you, I really like that, Steve. I even wrote it down. What was it? What are you good at? So what are you good at? Show me. I like to see that because, I have personally, I was talking to, again, Steve, I was talking to a colleague saying that, that's not one of my best traits. So why don't you show me? And then from that, really building, I think empathy, I mean, emotional intelligence or empathy is the most important, realizing where people come from. Which was another point of yours, Steve. Realizing they come from different places, they are different life experience, different ages, different whatever, and then from then, shifting. You're not on the pedestal just because you're a mentor or you've got some years of experience. Just okay, be honest. You might actually learn something from them. Don't think you know it all. Come on, we all read God knows how many books per week because we know we don't know it all. So why not, instead of reading from books, why not learning from inexperienced teachers? They've had experience you haven't had.
Yep, absolutely. I wonder if we can just, I think we're all in agreement from what I'm gathering. Let's just shift then to the other part of the question, which was the reluctant mentor. Now, the reluctant mentor is a teacher who is probably asked by a director of studies or by a principal to become a mentor for somebody who's just arrived, whether they're new or whatever. And the question then to that person is, I thought you might be quite interested to share your knowledge, really. So we're going to turn it on its head a little bit, and we're going to suggest to this person that they are actually quite important in the organization, and that what they have to say is really interesting. And it probably is, but they don't want to share it for some reason. Another approach is, wow, yeah, no, I get that. I get that. I mean, new teachers, they take so much time, don't they? And you're very busy. Um, yeah. Do you remember when you were a new teacher? And that sometimes provides a little switch. You can see it as they go, oh, okay, yeah, I do actually. Do you remember when you were a new teacher? What did you need? What would have been really helpful to you? That's the way I would go. To be honest, I haven't had many that I can remember anyway, reluctant mentors. Most people approached in the right way, whether they're experienced or not experienced, are happy to give somebody else a hand.
I think the operative word is approached in the right way, because I don't know your experience, but sometimes they were not asked, they were voluntold,
That's
as
no
in.
good. Yeah,
So,
no, that doesn't work.
yeah. Neil, have you ever experienced like a reluctant mentor?
I think I'd have to agree with Steve and say no. I used to run a fairly large staff room of about 40 teachers, um, most of whom were highly experienced and well qualified. Some who were new, to use Steve's definition, in terms of being new to the institution and possibly being new to teaching in the university context rather than the private language school context. Um, but it felt as if the good mentors kind of almost emerged, that they were putting themselves forward, and it never happened, but I can imagine a difficult conversation where you have someone who puts themselves forward as a mentor because they have lots of knowledge, but actually would be probably a pretty awful mentor because they talked at rather than listened to. And I just wonder if either of you have got any thoughts in terms of, if you're in a position where you are buddying people up, or that's something you'll be doing in a future role, how do we deal with the inappropriate, keen potential mentor? How do we kind of guide them into a place when either they don't do it because they're going to be a car crash, or we help them to develop the right skills to be more effective? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the first thing I would recommend is watching this.
Yeah. Um,
I mean, I'm joking, but on the other hand, I'm not. Because all the points that you've raised just now are in some way covered during this session. Don't overload them. Don't display your knowledge. And it is tempting, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure we've all been there. I'm sure we have. I used to warn new trainers on a training course about this. I would say, when you get in there the first time, you're going to see this sea of faces in front of you. They're going to look up at you adoringly, and you're going to feel powerful. And you need to get that under control. You need to know that it's happening, and you need to get it under control. And the conversation went on from there into how the pleasure one gets from giving information. Yes, of course. Otherwise, why would we do it? But also the pleasure we get from having people arrive on their own by the seed which you've planted. And that's probably an expression I would use with, think about the seed that you're planting, not the bucket that you're pouring.
I mean, it's certainly the case when I'm working with pre-service teachers, CEL to Cert TESOL model, that one of the very first things I say to them is, please do not try to be me, because you're not me. Please try to be your authentic selves in the classroom, and don't see the trainer as the person to emulate. Pick from what she or he does well and you like, but learn to make it your own. And I wonder if that might help with a very interesting question that's just come into chat from Kingsley, who speaks about the fact that with a teacher of English of 6 years experience, therefore an experienced teacher, nevertheless has that sense of every time I watch your webinar or go online, I see there's so much more to learn. I mean, my response to that, first of all, Kingsley, would be to say, well, I've been teaching for 30 years and I go online and I have exactly the same feeling. Um, but Kingsley then goes on to say, would a mentor help to deflate this feeling? What can a good mentor do? And is the mentor the right function to help a teacher to build them up in terms of self-belief and permission to have their own identity?
I mean,
Hmm.
I'm taking this from a point of view of Neil has been, and this is no secret, Neil has been somehow the mentor for me through different courses that I've been on, and throughout the last couple of years. And what is it? Imposter syndrome. That's it, Kingsley. I mean, imposter syndrome is something that I ask Neil, I struggle with, and you know. Yeah, I can add whatever letters I want after my name, Kingsley. I will still struggle with it. But I remember at a very, very low point, I started talking to Neil, and he just had, and as a mentor, I don't remember Neil. I don't know if you remember Neil, but you just said, like, anybody that has a problem with you, let them come and talk to me about your knowledge, because I'm the first one to tell you that you know. Okay. And that was just so simple. And I was like, you think? Okay. And it's just so amazing, Kingsley. I really do believe that the right mentor really does help. I mean, imposter syndrome is something we all deal with, and we will keep dealing with. You will always find someone who knows more, who's read more, who's been to more webinars, who's got more letters after their name. But the right mentor does help build you up. Okay. And it doesn't have to be just, somebody that you work with, like, it can be somebody that you've met on one of those webinars, somebody you follow on LinkedIn or something like this. I think it has a great formative quality. I don't know. What do you think, guys?
I am tempted to throw a spanner in the works, yeah, because I don't think there's anything wrong with what Kingsley has termed as an insufficiency as a teacher. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I, I don't. It's not a rational. It's not a rational response, is it? And therefore, rationalizing it in terms of trying to explain it or trying to tell someone that actually they're very good isn't going to work ever. And that's I'm also thinking about music now as well. And somebody says, "Oh, I'm not very good on the piano," and you go, "Oh, right, okay," but you're doing, you're able to follow us, so that's good. But I don't want to change that person's mind. I don't want to change. A teacher feels that they're not doing a great job. I don't want them to get depressed about that. I don't want them to be stressed about that. But I also don't think that I want to try and change their mind. Is that weird? Perhaps I'm weird. But I have that too. As you said, Christina, we all have this. I think most of us who are half decent at what we do have that imposter syndrome. I think we do. No one's ever got rid of it for me. And I've got lots of letters after my name, and I've got more than 40 years experience. No one's ever got rid of it. I still get nervous before I go into a class, if I go into a class. Last time I went to a class a long time ago, it's true. But I still got nervous. I still get nervous before one of these things. What if somebody asks me something I don't know the answer to? And that it can happen. Try and change my mind on that. You can't. You won't. Leave me alone with that sense that I'm not as good as I want to be, because it drives me forwards. It's part of what motivates me. I want to be better. I want to learn more. I'll never get to the point. This also applies to learners of language, doesn't it? Have you met those learners who go, my pronunciation is not so good. I'd like to be very much better than I am. And you go, in your head, you're going, come on, But actually, you know that that's what's pushing them forwards. leave them alone. Sorry if that's a rather
That's
what's
what we
the
want, Steve. That's what I like about you. You always come up with something that goes, initially it's a bit like, and then, oh, actually, that does make sense. Yeah, it's true. You do need that little drive. I'm just wondering when it borders on not psychosis, obviously, but when it borders on anxiety.
yeah,
That's why.
okay,
That would be one.
then we have to consider carefully what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't think that's as common as it's also true, of course, that lots of teachers burn out, and that's not good either. My daughter was a teacher, and she burnt out, and now she's becoming a probation officer. God help her. So
I
I
can
don't
see
know what.
I mean, going back to Kingsley's point, I mean, Kingsley, I hope that you feel that the flood of understanding that came in chat, as well as the really wise comments from Christina and Steve, have helped you to realize that A, you're not alone, and B, it's quite natural, and C, actually, as long as it doesn't become a negative, destructive self-talk, in fact, it can be a motivator and a driver. Because I do remember that time, Christina, where you were at a low ebb, there are times when I've been at a low ebb, and actually sharing and that honesty. And I was saying, well, don't, I mean, I think hopefully I was a little bit more kind and saying, don't be ridiculous. But it was effectively, well, those people don't have the right to say that to you, do they? And and so I guess it's about listening. Steve, I know you have very strong views about ELT not being about therapy. But I thought it was very interesting as soon as you started talking about Milton Erickson, who influenced NLP, which has had a very checkered history in terms of English language teaching, but who himself was a therapist. So I just wondered if we could kind of tease out how therapy can inform the development of a therapeutic practice can inform the development of a teacher without it becoming something that a teacher then tries to do. And if you had any thoughts and you could share those with us.
I could keep you engaged for about 2.5 hours on that topic.
You might.
It's one of my, I'm not going to. It's one of my favorite areas because I was trained as a therapist. I studied Milton Erickson. I was trained as a social worker. I've used hypnotherapy a long time ago. And this is why I think it's made me super aware that it must never come into the classroom. I said in my talk earlier that every time we open our mouth, we manipulate somebody. And I believe that very strongly. I'm doing it right now. I'm trying to get you to believe what I'm saying is true. And we do that all the time. Even when you're saying, I think I'm going to get a cup of tea, there's an under message there. So every single communication is a manipulation. Some are massive. Look at Donald Trump. And some are tiny in terms of our everyday communications. So there are two things to say here, which I think are probably equally important. The first one I'll get out of the way very quickly, and that is that we're not paid to be therapists, and therefore we mustn't do it. We're not paid to cut our students' hair. We mustn't do it. We're not paid to apply makeup to our students. We mustn't do it, right? Even if we think we should or could, we mustn't. We can't. We don't. Good. That's done. Finished. Secondly, unless you really know what you're doing, you're going to do more harm than good. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And even though I might know what I'm doing, I'm not saying I do, but I might. I'm not going to use what I know in a classroom because that's not what we're here for. But I will, as I said in my talk, I will use minimal techniques which will help the interlocutor to relax and to get on with the job, to free them up. Those questions that I suggested earlier on, the questions that sorry, I was just looking at Gabby's comment. Oh, I do believe every time we open our mouth we manipulate. Yeah, we do. Yes, so those questions are designed not to make me more powerful, but indeed quite the opposite. They're designed to do exactly the opposite of that. They're designed to make the person I'm talking to feel more powerful and actually be more powerful. They're so simple, man. You know, would you like to do this now or later? Well, I think we'll do it later. Okay. That's it. It's simple, but it's tremendously powerful. You are going to get your head around it. I just don't know how quickly you're going to do it. If you need to, people in the audience here, please look back at that stuff because they're very, very simple. They're very accurate and they're tremendously helpful.
Can I ask Steve, where would you recommend us to go and to find these techniques applied to the field of teaching? Is there something you would recommend we read, or?
No, as far as I'm aware, there isn't anything. I think I'm amongst. I think I'm amongst few. When Neil, you said that Milton Erickson influenced NLP. Actually, he didn't. Neil, he didn't give a toss about NLP. He didn't even know about NLP. His therapeutic processes were studied by Bandler and Grinder, as you know, and they invented NLP. But he wasn't part of that. It's very, very, very important to differentiate.
No,
He was
that's
a
but you would agree that Bandler was influenced. It was really
yes,
interesting when you're
yes,
talking about
yeah,
hypnotic language.
yes,
I think, hypnotic language is an important part of NLP. And,
yes.
the double bind question, I recognize very much as being an NLP technique.
Yeah,
But of course, the problem with NLP, and for those of you who are less familiar with it, neuro-linguistic programming, the way in which we can influence other people through the language that we use, that, it's got a bad reputation because it's been misused in high pressure sales, when in fact it was really, as I understand it, Bandler wanted it to be about the individual achieving the best possible version of themselves, the pursuit of excellence, which is actually, I think, what mentoring is also about. It's about facilitating the individual to become the best possible, in this case, teacher that they can be. So, in kind of, what's the word? How can we avoid Christina's question about, is there anything that we can read? Is there any resource? Do you think there is value in any training of teachers that looks at hypnotherapy, hypnotic language, or NLP in order to enable the learner to pursue excellence, or are we actually going too far away from the role of what the language teacher does?
no, I think there is a case. I would take out NLP and throw it away. But there's a case for a certain amount of minimal training for teachers in three areas: body language, which is hugely influential in terms of that manipulation thing that we were talking about earlier. The way that you look, the way that you hold yourself and interact with others is tremendously important, which is why I can never be an online teacher. Secondly, the language that you use, extremely language can be used extremely carefully, or it can be used extremely carelessly. And so part of this imaginary training that we're talking about would include some work on language. And thirdly, probably goes together with the first one, really, and that's voice tone. The way that we pitch our voices when we're trying to get someone to do something, when we're trying to manipulate somebody, when we're not happy with somebody. Think about this: how your voice changes. How the staccato nature of your voice changes when you're trying to put a point across, when you get angry, or when you're actually perfectly relaxed and just going with the flow and calmly getting someone to think in the same way that you do in some way. So the answer to your question is yes. Neil, when should we start?
Actually, my question would be, Steve, when do you start writing the book? Okay, 'cause I'm putting pre-order on that book right now.
It's an idea, I mean, seriously, yeah. Perhaps there's a market for that. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
Neil, I mean, I've been a teacher trainer for several years. I mean, this is, I mean, I'm part of that Facebook ELT Haven, and you mentioned, you put something on feedback, and I literally told you the best thing, one of the best thing about that is that you allowed us to have some of that wording. And like I told you, I mean, I'm taking notes on, guiding towards discovery. What are you good at? And all the things you said. I get that you're very busy. Remember when you were a teacher? These are essential. I mean, these are not things we can just take and put into our teaching, but these are the framing of the language. I mean, I'm Steve, I have a background as a bachelor of psychology, but we never learned that, this is therapy. And although I do agree we should not be giving any type of therapy into this is not a paradigm in any way, shape, or form, whether we're teaching or teacher training, which is really hard to just step away. But still, we need that when we're giving feedback, when we're observing, when we're just dealing with people. I think that's definitely something that I don't know, guys, in the chat, but that's definitely something that I know myself and loads of my colleagues would be really interested in.
there we go, Gabby. There's a topic for a future gallery teachers session. Just volunteered you, Steve. Conscious that we are about 5 minutes before we're due to end, but there is a very interesting question that's gone into Q&A from Rejoice. And Rejoice's question is in terms of, again, obviously a very a highly qualified teacher, bachelor's degree in secondary education, SALTA, teacher training certificate, 10 years experience, and is asking whether a period of volunteering in a school to conduct training programs of 4 1.5 hour sessions, would this be beneficial? Now, I guess it's quite difficult to answer that explicitly because we don't have the complete context and so on. But in terms of having identified that, and this answers anonymous attendees' question about, do I need tons of certificates? Actually, we don't think it's to do with letters at all. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about the ability to listen and to ask questions. But if we have all of those in place, what's the next step in terms of enabling someone down the track of mentoring? How valuable is experience? Is volunteering in a teacher training role, is that useful, do you think? And of course, we're generalizing here.
Yeah. I think we're talking about something just very, very slightly different. I think we're talking here about a CPD program. And while mentoring is part of CPD, it's not a program because it's very much one-to-one individual. I mean, I think mentoring is one-to-one. That's what I want to say. But please, hang on a second, I need to open up. Yeah, Rejoice, please do that. That sounds great. And it will be, I'm sure, beneficial for you, but also beneficial for your recipients. Go gently, go carefully, find out what they need, and yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
I think that's one of the main takeaway that you had, Steve, and Neil, tell me if you agree, is stop looking at it as in going head first, is find out what they need, find out what they want, just really putting them first, empowering them first. And then afterwards, I mean, I think this distancing, as in, don't be the first one to speak automatically. Don't be, at least for a serious amount of time. I think that's really put them first. And that's maybe something we don't really get as a mentor, is that it's not about a power play. It's not about, oh, look at me, I'm a mentor. No, it's about what can I do? And I think, Neil, you mentioned that. What can I do to help them? Okay. What is it that they need?
And I think therefore the mentor not only needs to ask questions, but to be open to feedback from the mentee in terms of how's it going. I mean, I hope you don't mind me mentioning, Christina, that you and I are in this kind of mentoring kind of situation at the moment, which I'm learning. I supposedly have the mentor hat on, but I think I'm learning much more than I ever anticipated in terms of working with you, thinking about the delivery of a kind of course that you've not been involved in before. And what I hope I'm doing is enabling you, I hope, tell me if I'm wrong, do it publicly, to, what's the word? Find your level. I've never wanted you to teach the course how I teach it because that's not appropriate. It's helping you to find the way to teach the course that works for you, that works for the learner. So it's
Yeah.
an openness to multiple ways of doing.
And it's this openness of, what about if we do this? What about if we do it? Yep, go for it. Yep, yeah. And tell me, how did it go? It's really this open communication, definitely, Neil. I mean, like you mentioned, I'm giving a course. I've done some certification for it, but never done it before. You've obviously done it way more than I, you've done it for years. And this is very important, this open communication. This is what a mentor-mentee relationship should be like, in the sense of, okay, show me what you've got and now let me make it mine to make it better for them. It's like you jump always. It's always, okay, let's go back to the main person, the learners.
And what a great point to end, that the mentor should always have present in her, his mind, not just the person that they're working with, but the fact that that person they're working with is in turn working with learners, and it's the learner that is as important as the mentee.